Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Hello. Hi, back there. Good evening, folks. Hello. Thank you. Hi, good evening. This is the East Aurora Union Free School District Board of Education meeting, public presentation and tour for December 7th, 2022. I'd like to ask you to join me in the pledge. Thank you. We'll just have one topic tonight, so Steve will get us started.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to those of you that have been here before. Good to see a couple of new faces. We are happy to be here tonight presenting for the final time for the capital project, which votes next week, Wednesday. Our agenda and goal here tonight is to go through a brief summary of the scope of work and then actually have a more exciting portion of this, which is the tour and walking around this building to sort of see some of the spaces in person and in some more detail. So we'll focus more in the presentation on the other two buildings in the district and then break up the group probably into two groups. My fellow compatriot Stephen, not to confuse you guys at all with the same name here, will go through in separate groups to make it easy, and then we'll reconvene back down here after for a Q&A period if you guys have questions or want to comments on anything you have seen. So before I go through the specific scope, we have given this presentation numerous times, and in the interest of giving the tour, have omitted several of the slides where we went through some of the background and history, as well as some of the details about the finances. So if there's questions on those, I'm happy to answer them. But in short, the project is built based off of the state mandated building condition survey, which is done by a team of architects and engineers, which review all the building facilities components at every building, evaluate them for their remaining useful life, and then put a respective cost to replacement if they are in need of replacement. From that list, that is taken to the district administration and the faculty and principals and evaluated for timeline, appropriateness, and then merging with other wish list need items, programmatic need items that are not simply facilities oriented, more than just a roof, what type of classroom space serving it, that type of thing. So that process took place from 2021 all the way through this summer when the scope was essentially finalized into this current format, which we have been presenting on. And it does have a couple focal points that I think are worth mentioning at the onset. The first and foremost items are safety and security across all buildings in the district. You'll see that mentioned a couple of times in the slides and then on the tour. Those items really focus on cameras, PA systems, clocks, security cameras, access controls, those elements that help keep the buildings safe. And then secondly, a focus on warm, safe, and dry elements, things like roofs. One roof that does need to be replaced in the district is here at this building. Don't worry, we won't take you outside to see the roof in town. So going through a couple buildings, specific items at each of the buildings. PARKDALE Elementary, of the project, it's around $800,000 worth of scope from the overall budget. The work incorporates PA clock systems, mechanical work, primarily air conditioning for IT spaces to ensure that those systems stay operational, additional security cameras, and some exterior door replacements. At the high school, once again, the main focus is safety and security. However, it is worth mentioning that of the building condition survey, which identifies over 1,000 items for review, there was only one item which was ranked as a failure in the entire district, and that was the tennis courts at the high school. Reason for that, going back in time a little bit, the tennis courts were put in their current location in 1960. 2004 when the building was originally built. At that time, it was built over a pond, most likely not infilled appropriately, and has been a thorn in the side of the district numerous times over the last half century. This was not built on appropriate subbase. So as the only item that was a failure in the district, it was important to include that in the project. In regards to the tennis courts, I can explain a little bit of the thought process for the site work based off of what's on the screen here. So the existing tennis courts are over to the side here across the north of the football field. The proposed location at this time is to move them directly adjacent to the football field, get them away from that bad subsoil, put them in a better centralized location. In doing so, it takes over an existing grass field. So part of the project then entails replacing the grass field with a new turf field directly parallel and adjacent to the current turf field. If you are familiar with the high school site, you know there are some definite drainage and water issues. The turf field solved those problems. In addition, the middle school does not have any fields of any kind. That's a landlocked site right here in the village. And a lot of the students that play sports here are transported over to the high school. Scheduling is also a concern. So there were multiple facets that really went into planning ahead and thinking about why a tennis court and then why a subsequent turf field as well. Mentioning things on the turf there. And then here at this building, we'll walk through a lot of these spaces. The first items though, PA systems, clocks, fire alarms, security cameras, family and consumer sciences, rooms, renovations. We'll walk into that space. Renovations to the library. Turning the library into a 21st century media center with technology, with books, with reading areas, with multiple flexible learning spaces, roof replacements, and finishing some of the work that was not completed in the previous project. So we'll see the library in person, but you won't see this up there, so it's worth showing. This is a concept rendering of what the space could look like. We have not yet met with the faculty and the staff to go through the details of the design. That'll happen through part of the regular design process. But that was the original building auditorium for this building. So the hope of the project is, in addition to upgrading the technology in the space for students, also open up the height of the ceiling space to take advantage of some of the original architecture. Completion of the first floor hallways. You see a nice transition here as you walk out the door here. Bathroom renovations, ADA improvements, elevator improvements. And then one other thing to mention here regarding the overall scope. One of the items that is worth mentioning is that the current bidding market and bidding climate is extremely volatile. So what we've done and attempted to do with the project here is account for that with the inclusion of contingency and the inclusion of alternates for the scope. So if money is available at the conclusion of the second phase of the project, there are several items on the district's long-term plan which could be prioritized based off the need and the amount of available money at that time. Those include new lighting for that turf field, pool bleacher replacements, renovations to classrooms at PARKDALE Elementary, and the shop room here at the middle school. Schedule for a project here. What we want to do is show this as an example of a project with the intention of a two-phase design and construction schedule. We're almost in 2023 here for the vote. Should the project pass next week, we would look at this two-phase project, meaning we can try to get construction started as soon as the summer or even spring of 2024, and then the second phase following in 2025. Reason for two phases, it expedites that initial portion of construction. So work that is a higher priority, safety, security, roof replacements can be done at a sooner date instead of having to wait longer for more complicated designs to go in and more state education department reviews. And it also helps us target a good bidding time for a project. We don't want to be trying to get contractors to do construction work as late as March, April, and May when they're already busy for the summer. So breaking it into two more manageable pieces allows us to target November, December, and January for bidding schedules. Obviously, this is all a target and tentative at this point. We're very much at the whims of the state education department. But if anything like that were to come up, we would obviously communicate with the district and have a plan of attack to make sure we're doing things the right way. Phase one, as I mentioned, the high priority items in our mind: safety and security, cameras, clocks, PA systems, fire alarms, elevators, and elevator, I should say, and roof replacement. And then phase two would be everything else: the work of high school, library, family consumer sciences room, parking lot replacements, and the remaining work around the rest of the district. Touching briefly on the budget, once again in summary here, $22.3 million for the total referendum, broken up with around $800,000 of work scheduled at Parkdale, $13 million here, and $8 million at the high school, with that $500,000 in contingency for unforeseens, escalation, or hopefully some of those lists. In summary, I said I was going to go through this quickly, and I did. Building condition survey helps us create a long-term plan in the district, and then that long-term plan gets fitted into capital projects addressing the various needs of the district over a period of time. Using and funding this project, there are two primary sources. One is the existing capital reserve, basically the district's existing bank account, leveraging and using that money that's set aside for capital projects to offset a significant portion of the overall project cost, and then structuring the project in such a way as to have a small tax impact that would not exceed 1% on the local taxpayers to offset the remaining dollars to cover the cost of the work. Moving forward, the vote is next week. It is here, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. The signs are up and invitations are out. So before we go ahead and hop on the tour here, I did want to identify a couple items as frequently asked questions that have come up. Things we've had given multiple presentations here, and obviously people have been interested in the project and asked questions. There were some questions regarding turf. I think earlier in the presentation here, I talked a little bit about why turf in the first place, taking over an existing field and the wet conditions of the site. It is noted, we didn't have the answer on our fingertips like one of the previous presentations. Your existing field is manufactured by a company called A-Turf. It's their A-Turf piping system. That is a very similar system to what is installed at Highmark Stadium in Orchard Park. So it is relative equivalent of an NFL caliber field and stadium. Yes?
Is that a slip film?
No, it is not.
What kind of product is it?
It's a hybrid. It uses a combination of slip film and monofilaments. So it's another question that had come up would be what type of turf would be installed as part of this project. So a couple of points here to mention and talk about. I can go into them in any level of detail that you would have. The first is that this is a publicly bid project. So we're not able to identify a specific manufacturer for anything and lock it in place. It has to be open and competitively bid, which opens the door for multiple vendors, multiple manufacturers. What we do is we create performance specifications that govern what are the minimum requirements: warranties, durability, type of turf, resistance to impact and shock absorption for concussion-related incidents as the basis that any manufacturer would have to meet. The second is that the schedule really would preclude us from going too far down the road with a specific manufacturer or product at this time. There's new inventions in all of the fields: mechanical, technological, turf, every year. One of the few things that doesn't change is concrete and asphalt. We kind of know where we're going with that. But we don't really want to lock ourselves into one specific system. 2 years from now, there might be something better. So we're always on the lookout for what those things are, and we bring that information to the district's attention, have the athletic department, the facilities department, staff all weigh in on what the right direction is to go at that time, provided it stays within the original established budget.
Good. Did you guys do a cost comparison for a grass field?
Cost comparison?
Yeah, did you take into account the cost of a grass field? As long as you're doing a new field?
Yes.
What's the cost comparison be for that?
Just state your name, I'm taking
Larry.
minutes.
Alessi.
Pardon?
Larry Alessi.
Yes, we did.
You did, what was that? What did that total come to?
The grass, I don't have the number off the top of my head. I can tell you the grass field cost is less than a turf field cost. However, with a properly drained grass field, it's more than just putting in seed and sod. You usually build up with several feet of pipe and sand underneath it. And what that doesn't cover for, though, are the inherent issues with the overall drainage of the site. The turf products do respond better when you're over a wet site in general. Kind of acts more as a parking lot almost in some ways, where the water is almost trapped on the turf field and drained inherently through it. It's not entirely reliant on percolating through the grass field and down into the soils in the same way. Additionally, the cost of it doesn't account for upfront, doesn't cost for yearly maintenance on grass fields, wear and tear, usage of the field in spring and shoulder months, which tends to be problematic on grass. So ultimately, this is important.
Do you know any other small schools that have two turf fields?
I know of multiple small schools that have large turf complexes that count for multiple fields on them. Depew would have a baseball, softball, soccer turf complex that does account for multiple fields being used at the same time. Steve, Justin?
Yeah, there are some big complexes, Sweet Home's got a multi-field complex, Niagara Falls, bigger school districts, to your point.
Yeah.
But, most of the school districts have athletic facilities that are on, ground that drains. And, I can tell you myself, I played football on those fields in the 70s. My son played football on those fields just recently, and they don't drain. And after practice, we used to go into the showers with our uniforms on, wash the mud on. I mean, we would destroy those fields practicing. So the turf gives you the ability to be able to have modified JV, varsity, and without tearing up the fields and wrecking. So, I think that was a big consideration.
And I would add to that, that on grass fields, you get 200 to 300 hours per season of playtime. And that includes all the teams that are gonna play. But on turf, you get almost 10 times that. You get almost 3,000 hours playtime on turf. So when you account for what you just mentioned, the number of teams that we have playing on those fields, we need the playtime.
I would mention the fact that when it is so wet, the number of kids that slip. I mean, my daughter is an example of that. I mean, there's a lot of safety issues when you've got drainage. It's hard, like unfortunately, to me, this is also part of the safety issue for our students.
So there is no number at all you have for the grass field.
I don't want to say something incorrect tonight. I can get information back through the Board of Education out to you, but I don't have anything else.
When those, fields were installed, what the date was approximately?
It was the old Becker farm up on that site. Property was bought by the district, the old Becker farm, and the school was built in 1969, 69 and 70. And we moved in March of 71. I was a freshman, and so I'll look at it.
So all those fields on the south side of the high school installed in the 70s?
Except for the lacrosse field, that was built, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago.
The cost for the turf field would be $1 million, is that what we're looking at?
Around that number, yeah.
And that's not covered by the state's not gonna be reimbursing that, that's 100% on us.
No, the state does reimburse a portion of it. So the way site work and incidentals work, the state does have, there's a cap on how much you spend on a site, but as long as you are pairing that work with work in a building, it is eligible for building aid to a percentage point. So it is not 100% of the fall of taxpayers.
Like what is the percentage point that's covered? If it's tied to it?
If it's tied to it, what's the aid ratio? Rick, do you have the aid ratio off the top of your head?
The district ratio is 66%. So what that means is 66 cents out of a dollar covered by state building. Steve referred to what the incidental allowance, which covers site work, which is everything outside the building, parking lot, turf fields, professional service fees, architect, construction manager. So at the high school complex that we're speaking of, the estimate that we've come up with is of the total of the high school, $2 million of that amount is over the cost allowance or not eligible for building.
So we're 2 million over.
Of the total project,
So that's of the 8 million that you're proposing?
of the 22.3 million total, 2 million of that is not eligible for aid.
Wait, but that, you're not spending 22 million at the high school, you're only spending
Total,
8 million.
at the high school.
So what portion of the high school, the turf is not
2
covered?
million.
So 2 million of the 3 million is
But
not
there's also
covered.
other work outside of the tennis courts.
Right.
There's
There's a lot of other work that's,
drainage.
so you can't just say it's the field, it's 2 million of everything outside of the
So the
of the building
parking lots,
parking lots, tennis
are
courts.
both parking lots being redone?
No, just the lot that is on the back of the building from the road, but I always call it the front of the building. That's where the entrance is for security.
So on the east side or or I mean the west side or
West-
south
west.
side?
Yeah, we rebuilt that in 96, 97 project, and expanded it. When the backside of the building became the front side of the new main entrance was part of the project. So that's been in, 20.
Got a quick question on financials. Can you go back to your financial slide real quick?
Can I get your name?
First, Herrera.
The rare.
Herrera. The contingency is 500,000, so over $22 million budget, that's 2.3% roughly. Is that a pretty standard number for a project of this scope?
No, I should clarify that a little bit more for you. So every number here, when we fill this in, so even the $800,000 in Parkdale, there are standard percentage escalation and contingency factors inside of each of those numbers. Those are pretty standard for us on every project in every area. I know Steve and Justin could speak to it for different school districts as well. Same for us at different districts. Usually around a 10% contingency. There's a design contingency for unknowns during the design and scan cover, and then a construction contingency for unforeseen later. This 500,000 is on top of that, which I think Jerry is pretty unheard of for the way we structure things typically because of the last 2 years.
Because of the volatility in the market, that was built into the budget to provide flexibility. And, going into a referendum, in this day and age, especially having flexibility for the district, protects the district and the tax.
Thanks.
Well, but you also have some alternate, right, Steve, that like use that money.
Absolutely.
If money's available, it will be used for all.
Absolutely. Yeah, my question was basic question about contingency, that fairly lengthy renovation. Minimum.
Yeah, if you do the math on it, it seems small, but it's on top of a traditional contingency that's built. I have one last frequently asked question item that we figured we'd mention, and this is probably a good segue into taking a little tour around this building because it does relate here. What will the media center here be like after the renovations? There were some questions about, well, are all the books going to be gone? How is this going to change? What are we going to see? Well, what we typically see with new renovations in media centers is that when we meet with the staff, we understand and hear very regularly that the old layouts and the old footprints of the space don't allow for flexible learning spaces. They don't allow for groups to gather, small groups of students with teachers, areas where students can sit and read together, where they can watch a presentation or a webinar or something together. And what we try to do and what we've designed in the past and what we'll attempt to design here with the collaboration of the staff is reconfiguring the existing library to better organize where the books are, consolidate them potentially in taller book stacks, put them in other areas, and create different zones as are needed by the specific needs of this building and of this district. Then we'll incorporate things like reading areas, new technology, more electricity, more power outlets for charging stations, that type of stuff, in addition to the flexible learning zones and areas. All right, with that, Stephen's gonna take one group and I'm gonna take one group. And you guys are welcome to split up, obviously, but say maybe half the room and half the room. We'll just go in two opposite directions. It's the same tour. Loop in different areas. So I will gather by the ramp, and then everyone else wants to gather with Stephen here at the stairs. We'll go out to different exits. You want to do like a one go upstairs first, or you want to? We'll go upstairs first. You'll go that. You'll follow in the back. Okay. Yeah.
Regarding the air conditioning, is there air conditioning at all? That's, I've never had a student in this building, so I don't know. Is there air conditioning throughout this building? And if not, is that going to change with this project?
It's parts of this building, and
So still not all of
yeah,
it?
but it will be in all of it when this is done.
Oh, that's like that.
Yes.
Okay. This doesn't pertain to this, but I'll just gonna put it out there. The Austin air purifiers are very nice, but they don't work unless they're on. So I was told that when the teacher or whoever's in charge of a particular room leaves, that they turn them off. So does that mean that the need for purification leaves? Because now everyone in that space is now deposited their breath, air, and skin cells and everything. So everything should be left on. I noticed that at the high school as well, in the building at room 106 last week. We were there for a basketball meeting. And I was astonished that these units, they're nice units, but they should be left on to do their job, to clean up the space for when the occupants reappear.
The question came up in the home ec group.
I'll check into it tomorrow.
Go ahead.
On another note though, isn't that running electricity that's not, I mean, I don't know enough about the air filters to know if they're required for 24 hours, but I would also say on the other end, if we leave them running all on all night, that seems. It's another point, but we, I guess.
They're just not going to do the job. It happens to be effective, like,
So it's required for around 24 hours.
typically, yes.
And are those required in our district now?
They were given to us by the county as a basic measure to create bigger spaces for our students and our staff. So cost to the units, which are actually quite efficient and quite effective in terms of their air purification. But we look into both of those things, the cost of what it does cost to run, and also just the idea of having it run.
Yeah, why wouldn't you want the space clean for when the occupants enter again?
I'll check into it tomorrow.
Thank you.
One other question is if you need comment on the tour. Stephen did a great job. Thank you. Ms. Farnham?
The current boilers, you mentioned that the airspace, well, obviously the airspace in the library was going to definitely at least double, if not triple. The airspace that needs to be conditioned, whether heated, cooled, or whatever it's going to be done, or purified. Are the boilers, current boilers, sufficient to handle that extra airspace, both in the library and specifically the halls as well? You're adding probably, I'm going to say probably another 30 cubic feet, 30%, or maybe a quarter of
By
cubic.
raising the ceilings in the halls. And
Yes,
putting things
yes.
up. The heating systems have the capacity.
the boilers do have that capacity. And then, so you're going to put new air handlers and AC units into on the roof to handle the new conditioned space.
If the units are good, in good enough condition and new condition and can be reused, they will be. They might be supplemented, or they might be replaced. We haven't gotten into details of the design yet to know if they'll be fully new or not in those spaces. It might be an age thing. If it's within 15 years of replacement, if they're, say, 8 years old, 7 years old, the state wouldn't fund replacement of those units. And so it might be more economical because of the age ratios to supplement them to allow them to work properly for the increased volume of space or push air around, or they'll be repurposed in some way, or if they're older, then they.
So then the budget that you asked for will suffice to,
We included a budget for replacement. So if it's another avenue of alternate work potentially, if something is discovered in a better condition than we're holding.
Other questions? Sorry. Other questions or comments this evening?
Current water line system.
Yes. Yeah, the existing, it's not in every building. The head end conditions in the buildings are different, different eras, different ages. But in buildings where it's a full gut replacement, you have to replace everything. Devices, the code changes recently require different enunciation devices, which then requires a different feed from the head end system. So even systems that are 20 years old are now outdated. When you replace it, you're required to bring everything up to date. Everything is working currently, so there's no safety issues, but it's nearing the end of useful life, and that's not something you want to have fail.
Other questions or comments? Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking the time to take a tour and participate. Well, that's Wednesday.
Next Wednesday. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry. I pulled. I may have a motion to adjourn the meeting. Moved by Mr. Lillard. Seconded by Mr. Proto. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstention? They're carried 5-0.